Good evening, morning, afternoon, night, whenever you find it most convenient to join us at the Bonfire, the last bonfire of the regular season prior to the off season. I, as always, am Alan, the pole with the goal, and that goal is to enjoy this nice Dr. Pepper after what seemingly was an incredibly long week. I, as am joined by my lovely jubbly co-host, DJ.
Hello, Dr. Pepper would be good, I think, for you.
And Tim.
You know, you said it was the last one of the regular season. I was thinking of it as the first one of the off season. We have a philosophy debate we could possibly do, but I think we should probably save that for the off air time.
Yeah. Sure, whatever. And because we saw the last game, I meant to say that because we have the last game to talk about, but we'll talk it incredibly briefly, and that is, of course, the Nashville game where the Fire lost 3-0 at home. Just a complete, a not so fun way to cap off the season, essentially. Grant Halter was attending. Of course, he was doing the sound the alarm. There was a decent amount of people there. I'm pretty sure 20,000. The Fire broke, I think, their highest season average attendance record. So it shows that the team can bring people, but, they need to win.
They had actually broken it 2 games prior, which says something about the number of people that showed up. What wasn't sure was that more or less sure, they had it in the bag, but they needed about 1,300 people and change to show up for them to break 20,000 average per season, which is a nice round number, but it's also incidentally the capacity of SeatGeek Stadium, where they used to play. So the fact that they have exceeded that, they're at like 21,300 and change for the year, just shows the potential that moving back to Soldier Field gave the team. Obviously we've also seen limitations this year, which we'll talk about in a bit. But I don't know. Fire lose to Nashville that's not even really news. Does anyone have any burning thoughts about the game other than just the fact that
that was definitely the last game for multiple players.
Yep.
Yes, and we'll get into that. The Fire have confirmed some of them will not be returning. Some others are on the fence. The other thing that's kind of worth, I think, saying is that Frank Klopas, it's the end of this chapter of what he has done with the Fire. He has a new role with the Fire as I think assistant director of football or vice director of football. I can't really
Vice president of football.
Right. So there's a director and a vice president. So this is a very logical org structure the Fire have going on. Definitely makes it easy for me to remember. But he's talked about that role some. I think he's excited. I think that it's really the role that he wanted prior to this season, but was convinced to take on the coaching job. He will do everything for the club that he possibly can. He was, kind of talked into doing this job. And even if the results weren't there, it wasn't for lack of trying or effort on his part.
Greg is arguably one of the biggest cheerleaders for the Fire, so it's nice that he's still sticking around.
Amen. I say to that.
Frank wasn't going to leave, I don't think. And I mean, obviously at this point, I think that he's earned a role with the club as long as he'd like to keep it in some capacity. And it seems like he's found one that really plays to his core strengths without really making him do things that are not really what it is he wants to be doing now, which is, I think, win-win and hopefully a win for the Fire moving forward.
Yep. So, as we mentioned, there's some Fire players that are moving forward or possibly moving forward. Can you run down who's moving on, who's possibly staying, all that fun stuff?
So, yeah, about a month earlier than they did last year, the Fire announced which players basically would not have options picked up or new contracts. So Jonathan Dean and Jeff Gall both had options. They were both picked up, so they will be returning in some capacity for the Fire next year. Players that were out of contract that are not being renewed. Ariel Lassiter, which was not unexpected. He was here for a couple of games. He kicked the ball around a little bit for the Fire. I don't think he's going to be remembered very much as a Fire player, except maybe in a trivia question. Fabian Herbers, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a second. Rafa Chihos and Spencer Ritchie. Alan Aragoni, who was technically here on loan, but had a purchase option from Lugano, who obviously we kind of have an in with the owners. So he will not, his loan option was not picked up, so he will be returning to Lugano. And Fabian Herbers, I think, is one of the biggest names that is not returning. He was one of the only Fire players that, I think the only Fire player that had first team actual minutes prior to George Heights taking the role with the Fire. The other big name is Rafa Chihos. I don't know if any of those are really unexpected. Still, I think it was a little surprising to some fans to see those mentioned.
Herbers leaving, I feel like, is one of those. He was a casualty of the Heights roster signings. His contract was way too high for what he was going to be doing under Berhalter.
I think it's also just that the team needed roster flexibility to move to just like as every dollar they can get their hands on to make the signings they want. And even though I think that like Fabian Herbers can fit on like 27 rosters in this league, even at the salary he was at, I just think that needing the flexibility was more valuable than the flexibility that Fabian Herbers provides on a roster as a player right now. Two other names that I didn't mention, which I should have, Wyatt Omsberg and Javier Casas Jr., both of whom are out of contract, but the team is in negotiations with them, so we may see one or both of those returning.
Please, Wyatt, I need you to come back.
If Casas returns, I fully expect him to return to Fire too. I'll throw that out right now because he's already basically on the minimum as he can be.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, obviously, as a player that's out of contract, that's a negotiation that they can have. His MLS rights will stay with the Fire because he's not eligible to be a free agent, but he could sign with the USL team. He could sign with a team abroad because he's out of contract. Wyatt Omsberg is a free agent. He can sign with any MLS team that he wants, as well as making a signing to another league.
If I've said it before, I feel like if Wyatt leaves the Fire, he's probably going to Portland, Maine, because they're getting a new soccer team.
Yeah, I think that he is. It's going to be a USL 1 team, if I am correct about it.
Yep.
I think that he is way higher than that level. And I think that he was a good deal on the amount of money that he was on for just the strength that he provided as a center back. The injuries, I think, really set him back because he had established himself as a starter for the Fire and then promptly was injured and never really was able to make it back. So I think the other names worth mentioning, Dowd, Wooten, and Becerra all are on options. They're all currently playing because they're either in USL or MLS Next Pro. When Dowd was loaned to Nashville's US or MLS Next Pro team, they have a purchase option on him. I think that a goalkeeper of his caliber, if I'm Nashville too, I am picking that up as quickly as I can because he's a very good goalkeeper, and not every MLS team has an academy that produces goalkeepers on trees like the Fire do. So we will see about that. The other news, I guess, while we're talking about roster moves, the MLS Players Association did the roster like salary dump that they do twice a year. It normally comes out a little bit before decision day. This year was a little bit later. The Fire were 13th in spending as of when the data was released, mid-September, which is after the roster freeze. So it doesn't really matter except for signings for next season, which I don't think there's been any league-wide. That 13th is a big drop from 3rd, which is where they were in the spring release. Obviously, the big difference is we're subtracting a Shaqiri adding an area Lassiter to the numbers. It made the Fire $7.9 million lighter in salary spend than they were earlier. And when you add that to the players that we just talked about that will not be returning for the Fire, that's another around 2.6 million, 2.7 almost and change when you look at it. So, the Fire are nearing $11 million in spend lighter than they were last year. So, Greg Berhalter will have a lot of roster flexibility. Not a ton, not as much as he could have, and there will still need to be moves that are made, I think, in the offseason for him to get everyone in that he wants. But a lot more flexibility than I think it looked like he might have just a few months ago as he works to remake the roster for the future.
Right. So, moving on, we have the Fire 2, who won their first playoff game in MLS Next Pro against Orlando City B. The game finished 1-1 after time, and it went down to penalties, which Fire 2 won. They advanced the Eastern Conference semifinals. They will be on Sunday at 2 p.m. Central at SeatGeek against Crew 2. Again, that game is going to be free both in parking and in admission. The saxophone will be there. You should be there too.
If you've never had the opportunity to dance to Careless Whisper during a soccer game, this is your chance. You should go for it. I haven't done it myself. I've been in the press box every time that I've experienced it, but it looks like a lot of fun. So I highly recommend people come out.
This is indeed a game everyone should go to except for me.
You can drive up. You got a car.
That's true.
Listen, the Gators don't let me leave.
It also wouldn't be surprising at all to see a number of first team players in attendance just cheering on guys that they train with regularly. And there's a couple players that I think may really have a case to be made for first team deals coming up. And, the Fire just opened up some first team roster spots. So if you want to see the future, they're also just like in general a fun team to watch. So I, again, highly recommend it. Sunday, 2 p.m. Enough time to do some stuff earlier on Sunday, enough time to do some stuff later on Sunday. The weather looks good. Come on, man. Just come out.
Yep. So some more news. There was the Berhalter Mansueto press conference recently that formally introduced Berhalter to the media and the press, including our very own Tim.
Yeah, I was there. It was good to meet him. We got the formal press conference, and then we got a chance to talk to both him and Mansueto for a few minutes afterwards. It's the same Greg Berhalter that I think a lot of us know from like USMNT press conferences. He was polite. He was, analytical with things. He's clearly a very thoughtful person. And we learned a little bit about the process that brought him to the Fire in terms of basically there being an existing connection, which, we'd reported a little bit on earlier, but between Berhalter and Mansueto, that was, I think, going well, but not really necessarily, it didn't necessarily make him the candidate to be either sporting director or head coach. Because of who Berhalter was and just the strength of his vision, that's what made the Fire decide that they wanted to spring for him having the dual role, which I think was one of the big topics of conversation, both at that press conference and beforehand, because he's one of only two, along with Peter Vermees, that are currently, both sporting director, director of football, chief soccer officer, whatever you want to call it, and head coach in MLS. Yeah, I mean, well, it's a lot of work for one person to do, right? Like it's two jobs that are, and this is what I asked about basically, like what made the team think that Greg Berhalter was the guy that could do two jobs, both of which are more than full-time jobs. And they basically said it's because of the strength of his vision for the club and the fact that he is willing to delegate, which, so I think that puts a lot of pressure on the names that are yet to be announced that are going to be joining the front office and the coaching staff to to really take the load off of Berhalter so that he can really be more of a manager in the like sense that all of us know it, of someone that is overseeing work and not necessarily doing work because there's just too much work for one person to do in the number of hours that there are in a day.
Yep.
But it was great. I mean, it was great seeing him. The other news that came out of that, which was sort of hinted at before, but Joe Mansueto had said that the team was, he basically talked about the issues the team has had with Soldier Field. He was polite about what Soldier Field has meant for the team. And I said earlier that they now have exceeded their average attendance, the average attendance that would be possible at SeatGeek, right? So in a way, the team has outgrown SeatGeek Stadium. But we also saw the limitations that Soldier Field has. And Mansueto is very frank about them. Like the team doesn't have access to the pitch on non-game days. There's conflicts with concerts in the summer, which is when the team has its best attendance. There are conflicts with the Bears in the fall, which the team would also have good attendance for. And that makes it a challenge. When Joe Schatz from On Tap Sportsnet was talking to Joe Mansueto after the press conference, Mansueto listed 3 parcels that the team was actively considering for a soccer stadium. One of which was the 78. That's the development along sort of like railroad tracks, just to the west of where Soldier Field is. The other is the mega development at Lincoln Yards, sort of like near Goose Island. And the third was the former Michael Reese Hospital site. It's sort of, I don't know if it's technically in Bronzeville's borders. It's like Bronzeville adjacent on the south side, closer to the lakefront. And that's huge that they've actually visited these 3 sites. And Joe Mansueto said the team is ready to move forward when and if the team feels like they found the right site. He also reiterated that, it's likely to be a privately financed stadium. So unlike the White Sox and unlike the Bears, he's looking to make it something that is not going to cost the taxpayers money. I don't know if that means he won't accept like money for infrastructure and stuff like that. That would be fairly normal for any business to accept. But unlike what the White Sox, the Bears, and even the Red Stars have been doing, he's not kind of going hat in hand to the taxpayer, expecting for them to pay for a building for a private sports team.
That may help him a lot as well. Because, I mean, it's already hard enough to get stadiums built in Chicago for multiple reasons. But, I mean, if he's like, listen, I'll pay for it.
I mean, certainly helps him with me thinking it's a good idea.
Also,
let's just hope
it's a good idea.
Oh, Alan, go ahead, finish.
No, it's okay. I was just also saying that it's a good idea, and especially what Tim was saying, that it's privately being financed by Joe instead of like he mentioned, like the White Sox and the Bears or Red Stars funding public our Illinois taxpayer dollars to do it. And it would especially help, like we mentioned with Soldier Field, especially in ability, there's some schedule changes. Speaking of the Red Stars, comrades, the Red Stars officially have a new identity. They have a new logo, new name. They've officially dropped a red from the name, and just like the Fire 4 years ago, have added FC. They're now Chicago FC, and per report, the red was robbed because of a possible association with communism. What?
Well, Tovarishi, I think we can deny this revanchist history.
I
don't know if the word for comrade is similar in Polish to what it is in Russian.
Comrade.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I think the other thing is the logo, it felt like a very generic logo when it was launched. It's basically like the NASL logo with like the Chicago 6-pointed star instead. And Chicago stars above it. A lot was made partly by me and by other people that it just didn't seem like a finished logo. It like that the type wasn't properly centered over the star and stuff like that. It just felt like for an ownership group that I think a lot of us were excited about to bring that much money into the league. and just the caliber of owner, especially compared to what the Red Stars had before. This just seems like they haven't really done as much as I had hoped that they would to sort of like move the league forward in terms of the standards, graphical standards, right? Like when you think about like the way that a team presents itself graphically, I think that affects the quality that people perceive in the product, whether or not that's fair or not. I think it does. And so that was a little disappointing for me, at least personally. But we'll see. The team did change its logo and stuff like that on social media, and then changed it back. I kind of would doubt that they're going to walk this back, though, just given the how long it takes to do these things and how long it takes to put them out.
My question on that is, part of the reason why it took the Fire so long to change the logo back, even after all the backlash, was because you had to deal with Nike or Adidas, and at the same time you had the USL. Louisville City actually rebranded at the exact same time, but the outrage was so loud from fans that they immediately walked it back. So I'm wondering if NASL, if with the Red Stars, it would actually be easier for them to walk it back than the Fire.
It's possible. We'll see what happens in the coming weeks. Again, like, I don't cover the Red Stars like I would like to. I just don't have enough time. But is again just disappointing to me to see the ownership seemingly out of sync with the fan base. Because as Jeff Reuter mentioned in a piece in The Athletic that I highly recommend everyone read, one of the unique things about the Red Stars name is that it was picked by fans and predates NWSL. They are one of two teams that remained from the original WPS Women's Professional Soccer League, along with the NY Gotham, who were originally Sky Blue FC, which was the most generic anodyne name imaginable. And so they were the only team with that length of history, predating the league by years, to still have their original identity. And now that's kind of been semi-taken away.
Sucks. That's all I'll say. So,
indeed.
Last topic, as I sort of alluded to when we were talking about the stadiums, possible schedule change in LA. There's been a report that MLS could possibly be moving to a European-style season where the season starts in the fall or late summer, ends in like late spring, early summer, basically sort of what Europe has going on, that there's a possibility that could come very soon if it moves through, which I have some doubts about how that will work.
Yeah, and so Nelson Rodriguez was quoted in Paul Tenorio's piece talking about a fan survey that they did, as well as the fact they need to survey fans more, which is probably giving Fire fans that have been around a certain amount of time some amount of PTSD on it, because I think that they have feelings on the way that Nelson conducts fan surveys. But I think the background of this that I don't think was as well reported as it should be is that Don Garber has said the league realizes it needs to pause for the 2026 World Cup happening in the United States and Canada along with Mexico. I don't think that they have been able to figure out how they can fit in a 34-game league season alongside the World Cup, alongside the League's Cup, which I know that like most people would probably just say then just cancel the League's Cup, at least for the year. But it's a major strategic priority for the league. And I think that they don't want to see that momentum they're really trying to build get lost. But even without the League's Cup pausing for the international breaks beforehand, a lot of games would presumably be played in the United States because everyone wants to play here. It just, I think that that's the concern, and I think they're just trying to come up with a solution for 2026. Whether that's a solution from 2026 going forward or just a 2026 solution I think is unknown. I think that that's also been one of the factors that has been why the U.S. Soccer Federation has been considerate, I think is the nice way to put it, with MLS concerning the U.S. Open Cup, because they realize with the FIFA Club World Cup happening next year in the United States and then the World Cup in 2026, those present unique scheduling challenges for MLS, and they just want to try to keep the Open Cup alive and get to the other side of that and then get things to be in a better space. We'll see whether or not that's what ultimately plays out.
I mean, I guess one positive would... Oh, sorry. No,
go ahead, Alan.
That at least one... Yeah, no, that's one positive of moving to the other schedule is that MLS wouldn't have to compete for viewership. The MLS playoffs wouldn't have to compete for viewership with like the World Series or the start of the NHL, the NBA, the NFL season, as well as college football. That by the time, if they did move to like a European season, they wouldn't have to deal with that. The only negative is you have teams like the Fire currently that share stadiums, or you have teams that are in very like that their conditions during the winter are very frigid.
Yeah, and so there's definitely challenges. I think the counterpoint to that is there's also teams in places like Houston or Austin or even some of the LA stadiums, Florida for that matter, where you try being outside there in middle July, and I think that people would make a case that it's different than frigid temperatures in the middle of February, but it's not worse or better. So we'll see. Paul Tenorio's, I think, article on this, I think, does a good job laying it out. He also said he's got a column that is going to be coming out explaining why he thinks it would be a good idea, and he lives in Chicago, so I think his perspective will be valuable. I looked at the Fire's attendance over this past year. Attendance is lower in colder months, for sure, but the thing that really hurts the Fire more than anything else, attendance-wise, seems to be playing on a Wednesday. So, if a lengthier season going basically year-round with a shorter break in the summer like they do in Europe, although Tenorio said that the league would probably break in the winter just like they do in, say, Switzerland and a lot of other countries that get cold. If that means fewer Wednesday games, then I think that would probably be a net win. It just wouldn't be a slam dunk for the Fire. And every team is different and every team would have its own challenges, right? Like there's teams in hot places. There's teams that compete with the NFL. There's teams that compete with college football. There's teams that would compete with college basketball, or NBA or NHL playoffs.
I will say, we had the guy, Danny T Radio, uploaded a video on this on YouTube, discussing the season going into the winter. I highly recommend watching it. And that basically is my view on it.
Mm-hmm. To close off last regular season episode, we of course have some off-season plans. So of course we have Keep or Kick coming probably or somewhere around November 5th. We'll be doing podcasts about every other week. We'll of course do a quick fire podcast when there's major news coming out in the off season. And of course, despite what the Fire did on the pitch and despite another season with no playoffs, we want to thank everyone for what has been honestly a great year for the podcast. So, shout out to all the people that have participated on the podcast, be it guests from other teams, be it like Matt, Alex, joined the podcast. Pretty sure Rye has also joined. And just a major, major, major shout out to the guy that makes this all happen, be it Austin. So major shout out to him. And of course, just a major shout out to everyone who joined us at the hearth that is the Bonfire, really. Just thank you for a great season for our podcast and for Men in Red 97.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. And I mean, again, it says a lot that you stuck with us throughout this year, which has been, I mean, look, at one point this year, I think more out of frustration than anything else, Frank Klopas walked out of a press conference saying that sports are supposed to be fun. And I think that the results of the season have been challenging for a lot of us, to say the least, and had made it less fun. And so sticking with us, even when the things on the pitch haven't been fun, means a lot to all of us here.
Thank you guys so much for following us all year.
And I say that. So, as always, you can follow us at MIR97Pods, MIR97 on Twitter. There's also Men in Red 97 on Instagram and also Facebook as well, I'm pretty sure. You can find all articles as well as the podcasts on meninred97.com. And then you can also find us individually on our socials. So for me, that would be Pull with the Goal 69 on Twitter. For Tim, it's
Were you pausing to ask my socials? Because that's Sing_Electric.
Yes, and you can find DJ at
I'm just curious how long he can. We need to upload the video because currently Alan is staring at us with a shitty grin.
I really thought he froze and because his internet's been bad, and I thought he froze, and I'm like, when is he going to say it?
I was because I don't have your guys' tags like memorized, so I was hoping you guys would just say it. So okay, I guess.
But no,
where can they find you?
Especially when you got a bad connection, you need to be like, Tim, where can people find you, or something like that. Not just like throw it out and freeze. Come on, man.
Clever, and unfortunately, with my situation, as you can hear, I'm not where I usually record, so it's not the best audio, but it is what it is.
He's been kidnapped and is currently being held in someone's basement. Don't worry, people.
Yeah, don't worry. Fine. I am being fed, hopefully. So, again, thank you everyone for joining for this incredibly long, weird kind of season, but I think there is a bright future ahead nonetheless. Not even just next season, but for the next few seasons onward for both the Fire and for Men in Red 97. So one more time for this regular season into the off season. Come on, you Men in Red.